So, welcome, guys. Welcome to another edition of the Builders Club podcast. Today is someone who brings together an uncommon mix of enterprise strategy, financial operations, and entrepreneurial creativity. So, today we have Celina Farquhar Maniece, who's currently VP Technology Business Office Consultant at Truist Financial Corp, where she works at the intersection of technology, finance, and ops, driving initiatives across enterprise platforms, budgeting, vendor strategy, and large scale infrastructure planning. Her work goes deep into the mechanics of how large organizations actually function, from cost structures and procurement to forecasting and operational efficiency, the kind of work that quietly powers transformation but rarely gets talked about. Now, what makes her journey more interesting is that alongside her enterprise career, she's also the founder and CEO of BizClips, a video-based social platform which is around helping users not just connect, but earn through content and distribution. It's a bold take on the future of social media where attention and monetization are more directly linked. In this conversation, we're going to explore how enterprise systems really function behind the scenes, what leaders misunderstand about operations and cost, and how someone navigates building inside large organizations and outside as a founder. Welcome, Selena. Welcome to the
Thank
Builders
you.
Club.
Thank you, Sohail. It's a pleasure to be here, and wow, what an intro. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Selena. You'll probably want to understand a little bit about your early life. How did you start? What all
Sure.
have you been doing? And currently, what stage of your journey are you at?
Absolutely. Well, I don't know how early you want to go, Sohail, but let me just highlight a few things. Everybody has unique aspects about their life, right? From childhood to adolescence to adulthood. Mine was a uniquely, I'm not going to say so much different because I'm sure there's a lot of people that can relate, but I grew up in a household dynamic with my grandmother, highly, highly involved. She had a certain precedence for the children, everything from image to personality to how you carry yourself, kind of cultivated the way we grew, mixed with some of the interests that we kind of, decided to go down. She would look at the grandchildren and see a certain interest that we had, and she would capitalize on that with trying to pour everything into us, mixed with my mother and my father. So they all were very heavily involved in my life to kind of, help guide and more so I would say embrace my creative concepts and my creative ideas. So early on, I was very, very creative. I would always come up, whether it was a different song or, a drawing concept or something. And they always championed me and supported that as opposed to trying to suppress it. With that also being said, early on, whenever I went to college, I went to Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, in which I obtained my bachelor's and master's from there. But that was more on the educational side of the house. But as far as like the organizational side, getting involved in different organizations and things of that nature, I had the opportunity to get involved with a particular organization and also had the ability to model throughout college. But the reason I share that is because it opened me up to different cultures. And I became very, very fascinated with different cultural dynamics in regards to misconceptions and misunderstandings. But having that common denominator that, we're all the same, and at the same time, we can leverage that to help capitalize and build and expand into different markets. So, to answer your questions from early on, it was that creative aspect and then seeing how a certain culture adapts to that creative concepts that may be put out into the market and their takes on it and the differences and then how can we bridge and merge that gap. And so I decided from that stage to start creating things that could be cross-cultural as well as leveraging certain networks and things of that nature to be able to prime example, how we're here in the US and you're in India and we can connect and we can have that synergy that can be beneficial to both markets. So I don't know if that's a long drawn out answer to your question, but yeah, that's kind of how it started off early on.
Interesting. And then you started working. in
Yeah.
the corporate ecosystem as well.
Yes, yep. So then I started working. That transition from that creative concept and idea, just to take it back a little bit, actually started working with college students and
Oh,
also
fascinating.
in influencing technology to leverage to show college students how technology can help them advance in various different markets. And with that, created the social media platform BizClips, which was out in the market back in 2015. We are reemerging to bring it back. Was able to obtain a patent, all these things, but it's still homed around the aspect of creation, technology, and building. With that being said, and having the ability to bring it to college students, was able to leverage more in-depth insight and help identify certain financial structures, not just for financial structures of the growth of my current business, BizClips, but also financial structures in regards to merging that in with major corporations and also major entities and CEOs and things that could see the value and benefit, even if they didn't understand the concept at that point in time, but they saw the future in it. And then they saw all the work ethic and everything that was placed behind it, which to your point led me into being able to work with very powerful key stakeholders, with various different corporations, and also being a liaison as a senior consultant for certain corporations on the tech side, dealing with finance, infrastructure, procurement, cost supplier management. So that way I could still cultivate that aspect and give leverage to corporations and CEOs, while at the same time I was still, rolling out biz clips in the emerging technology and being innovative in that capacity.
It's a very interesting journey, So in Texas University, you're working with students. You started
Yes.
off your in BizClips, and
Yep.
then you got into tech. That's a very divergent kind of a industry to
Yeah.
get into. How did that happen?
Well, that's an interesting question. Let me tell you about it. So, to your point, going back, even even back, let me scale back a little bit, back when I was in college. When I was in college, I saw a need. I saw a need in the market. At this point in time, I think social media was just emerging, different new innovative platforms. I think this was back when now I don't want to date myself. Back when MySpace was out, I was at the
I'm your
tail end
age,
of
don't worry.
MySpace and transitioning into Facebook back then. And the reason I share that is because I saw very early on the potential of Facebook and started utilizing that with some of our promotional campaigns we were doing with the organization I was associated with. The difference was at that time, though, it was still very picture based, but I saw the opportunity to leverage video and do different video promotional campaigns and things of that nature to kind of help push out the organization, and which it was very successful at the time. And it kept
Mm.
us, ahead of the curve. With that, and then transitioning into being with Texas A&M International University with the college and the student body population there, it used that same mechanism of technology, video-based technology, to help that student body population get exposure, help push them forward, help them get into other business avenues, especially upon their graduation. I think a lot of times the standard is let me submit a resume and hopefully, the business will reach out and call me in for an interview. But what I did, I took innovation mixed with video production and transitioned that into a peer-to-peer relationship with the student body population and changed the dynamic of a standard resume to put more of a video-based component to it, mixed
Wow.
with leveraging an unorthodox approach, something similar that we call or I call a pain letter. So instead of just starting with here's a job application, let me apply, start with the CEO, identify an area of need within their business compared to one of their competitors, and put a percentage on how you could help improve that vastly. And ask them if you could have about maybe 5 to 10 minutes of their time to speak with them. So I taught the student body population that structure, which resulted in over an 85% success placement rate. With that as well, I said, okay, how can we even expand this and take it further? When I was at Texas A&M International University, it was on the border of Mexico. So this goes back to that early childhood aspect of being very interested in cultural norms and differences mixed with, misunderstandings and how to bridge that. So being immersed there on the border of Mexico, even though I was on the US side, it highly catered to Mexico. So it was a different culture per se, but also trying to empower the student body population on how that's an added benefit to them. So if you speak, let's say Spanish and English, one would say you're bilingual. However, with Spanish being very close to Latin and as well as Portuguese. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some differences, right? But you can capitalize on that. The differences are not so hard to where if you go to Portugal, you're not going to be able to pick up certain cross-cultural, understanding, even though the language is a little bit different, but it's more similar than not. Same thing with Latin. So I was able to help them to understand their value, how to capitalize that, how to project that out into society, how to project it out into corporations, separate from your standard resume to help not just get you in the door, but get you high paying positions straight from graduating. And because you're no longer bilingual at this point, you're now trilingual, multilingual, but the average person may think with the first standard of, oh, I'm just bilingual. But once you pour that into an individual, mix with, now let's record it, mix with, now you have a video based resume and you're identifying an area need in a major corporation, you're now of a greater value asset as opposed to the standard person just submitting a resume based off of, an application or entry point to their
Mm.
employment process. So I know I'm giving you again a long answer, but that's kind of how that forward thinking and trying to stay ahead of the curve got from how does technology from working, and working with the student body population at a university to emerge into tech to where now I'm currently, dealing with, the procurement, financial components, cost management, and still keeping up with emerging trends and social media platforms. So it's very broad, but that's in the nutshell how it came about.
Very interesting. I always believe that media is, and in fact, one is, I think, what you did like back then is something which is now picking up slowly.
Yeah.
Video-based resumes and all of these things are slowly picking up. Now they're going mainstream now. Um,
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that because to that point, you know how sometimes people say you can be so far ahead of the curve, it's hard for people to grasp the concept and the idea.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's kind of like what I ran into. Especially coming out so early on with that. I always like to champion, we were the first ones to have video response components, and also
Mm,
utilizing consumer reviews to help businesses leverage, their products and their services, so that's something I'm very proud upon and why we was able to get the patent for BizClips because it was so unique. But to your point, sometimes you can be so ahead of the curve that the masses amount of people are not familiar to grasp the understanding to want to leverage and buy in accordingly how the creator may envision for them to do so.
yeah, yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think especially many a times in businesses, timing matters.
Yes.
Sometimes you're too ahead of the market, but that happens. That's a very logical thing. So from what I understand, and again, media, the moment you get into video production, it's a very ops intensive thing. And I think from there only, I believe your foundations of ops and vendor management kind of also kicks in.
Yes.
Um, and you kind of now have been working with Truist as well. In that I have a few questions in terms of
Sure.
how you approach things, and we'll get to each one of them. So I think in
Okay.
Truist, you're working very closely with technology, finance, and ops. What does
Yes.
good decision making actually look like in a bigger enterprise? I mean, just want to understand that from your perspective.
It's the foundation, right? You got to have excellent decision making, especially for the enterprise, just for the standard business functionality, just to do your end to end day operations, right? Because that's going to leverage the bottom line of the company. So in regards to technology and enterprise level aspects, you don't have a lot of wiggle room for error. You don't have a lot of wiggle room for not making good decisions, because not only would that maybe affect your current area, it affects the whole enterprise functionality as a whole. You have to have forward thinking. You also have to have innovation and be innovative, and how to streamline certain protocols and things of that nature to stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah. Are there any areas in which enterprises waste money without realizing?
So I would say, training is key. You want to make sure that you train individuals so that way they can stay current in the market, they can stay ahead of the curve, so that way you don't open yourself up to lose, revenue and from the lack thereof. I think right now the way technology is emerging at such a vast pace, especially when you take in consideration AI, it's
Mm,
making sure individuals are prepared,
mm,
prepared for short term as well as long term initiatives in regards to it, especially when you're dealing with enterprises and technology and things of that nature. Just our average everyday functions, we've become accustomed to surviving with technology. And I always use this scenario. This is the first time in history that you have all generations in the workforce together. Now, I know there's some certain, I'll say, nuances in regards to that, and also child labor laws and things, and that changes per country and continent per se. But in regards as a vast, especially here in the States, you have the first time in history where you have all generations in the workforce, from Gen Z to baby boomers, being able to capitalize on enterprise aspects, utilizing technology, and utilizing those enterprises that has certain technology things in place that make their average everyday lives a little bit easier and better. The thing with that, and I'll give an example, sometimes you'll run into certain people make statements, well, that's the old way of doing something, right? Let's
mm.
say even in regards to enterprise, maybe it's an old functionality, an old way of doing it, and you have a body or a population of people that's accustomed to that. When you try to bring in new emerging technology to enterprise or just to a person's average everyday life, they may be a little apprehensive because they're not familiar with it. They haven't kept up with the training or the learning to, one, know how to utilize it. So they'll try to suppress it even before they give it a chance. So, Helen, let me ask you, do you remember back in the day when, and this may be more so for our grandparents, you remember typewriters by chance?
Of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Could you imagine the current generation? Let's say, let's take Gen Z. Do you think they would know how to use a typewriter?
Looks like a keyboard, very frankly, but I don't think they'll be able to operate it completely end to end.
No, right? Because it
Yeah,
would be considered something that is an older
yeah,
functionality to be able
yeah,
to write letters and things. It was
yeah,
no email
yeah,
back then. It was
yeah,
let's
absolutely.
type this out.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because then now if you take baby boomers, now there are some baby boomers that are very up to date, ahead of the curve, but if you take baby boomers, they're not as accustomed to the new age technology, AI, or current internet and things. I remember back when internet first came out and it was the black screen with the green text. Wow, how far have we come? But
Yeah.
I always say all are needed, because if everything was wiped out today and we had to send letters, our baby boomers are going to know how to pull out a typewriter, draft the letter, and send it off, and they're going to teach the younger generation, and vice versa. The younger generation is teaching the baby boomers, our grandparents, our great grandparents, on how to look at a YouTube clip or things, or going back to the main question, enterprise. Let's say, especially if you're dealing in the financial institution and the banking institutions, you can now send currency various different ways, digitally, where in the past you could not. And we may notice with some of our baby boomers or some of our elders, they may be apprehensive to utilize that new technology to, let's say, send their college grandchild, $20 or something, because it's foreign to them. But I share that to say all aspects are needed. All generations are needed in today's economy in regards to the enterprise infrastructure. So the way certain things would be training and not having certain adequate training in place to keep individuals up to speed, up to date as those new technologies come out, then yes, you would lose, certain revenue
Interesting.
based off of that. Yeah.
Very valid point, actually. I think the right kind of training actually saves a lot of money. It's not wasting, but
Yes.
definitely optimizes processes, helps you in more efficient functioning. A lot of businesses often underestimate enterprise complexity. It's a web of shareholders and gatekeepers who are taking care of certain parts of the different cogs in the wheel. What's something about larger organizations which you think outsiders often misunderstand when it comes to enterprises? Anything that you can point out? When they're dealing with enterprises, many a times, a small business operates very differently, or rather, an
Yeah.
enterprise operates very differently from a smaller enterprise. So, if let's say
Correct.
a founder goes to do business with an enterprise, many a
Yeah.
times they don't understand the complexity of how enterprises work. So, any
Yeah.
specific things which you think that any outsider completely misunderstands about enterprises in general?
Yeah, I would say this kind of goes back to like the foundation of everything. A lot of times, especially when you take small businesses, is especially if they're just getting started, they have the idea and concept in their head, but they may not have it on paper per se. And prime example, when you're dealing with enterprises, whether you need to obtain funding, you're trying to, seek capital and things of that nature, or let's say you just need additional infrastructure initiatives that that particular enterprise, provides. It's being able to outline a clear picture of the functionality of your business, whether it's a business plan, a proposal, so that way, whenever you give it to the larger enterprise, especially if you're doing it to seek funding and capitalization, you want to give them a roadmap. Another example that I typically use is you want to give a pitch. You want to give an elevator pitch mixed with you articulating, the area of need as to what your business needs, but also you want to put it in writing on a one pager. So I would say that that would be the main thing for a lot of small businesses to home in on first before you engage large enterprises, because you're right, enterprises work completely different from small businesses. They're more so also looking on their return in a sense of you say return of investment, return of just let's say supporting the business maybe is on their optimization aspects, certain tools and things. We have several different technology corporations out. I would name a few, but I don't want to not exclude some, so I won't name any. But just thinking with some of the larger platforms in regards to tech, whether it's servers and things of that nature, or prime example, I'll just say GPS without mentioning a particular company for location navigation and things. You as a small business may have a website and you need to make yourself more visible through being able to give your clients location aspects, so that way you can highlight your clients and the locations of their businesses. Well, those are major enterprises that you need to connect with, that gives you access to the navigation and location setup. So the reason I share that as an example, in order to get that buy-in, especially if you're a small business, and let's say you don't have the most capital right now, you need to put that on, on a proposal. You need to leverage that so that way when you submit it, they're more likely to grant you access so your business can move forward and provide that service.
Interesting. In general, when you worked in both, on enterprise platforms, startups, um, what separates companies that scale smoothly from the ones that become chaotic? Because you are somebody who is very interested into ops as well. So how do you see systems functioning? What kind of companies you see working very smoothly versus some things which are very chaotic?
It always goes to, like you say, you want to start small, but you want to have the forefront and the foresight to create your roadmap for longevity, for scale and scalability. I think going back and looking at how much technology has evolved right now, it's also keeping in mind that you need to optimize. You're going to have to scale. A lot of times people run into situations with being able to have capital. There's a lot of different crowdfunding platforms and things of that nature out here. Obviously you could take out, loans, small business loans and things of that nature. But even outside of that, you have to have the roadmap on scalability, whether it's also networking, crowdfunding, but even beyond that is staying current with trends, is staying current with the enterprise and what the enterprise is rolling out. AI right now is very large, although it doesn't have a lot of governance around it. So, for example, one scalability aspect for some small businesses would be once governance is initiated with AI, that's a business within itself, on how to manage and merge that with various different corporations. So that could be a little nugget for scalability initiatives in
Interesting.
regards to small businesses emerging, going from that beta stage to your MVP and enterprise. You want to create those roadmaps on how do you envision? Look at the current state, look at current enterprises on how they're functioning. What companies are they partnering with? What other corporations are they leveraging? And then how can you simulate that on a small scale and also integrate yourself to create an area of need that could still make even your small business relevant as you scale with the major corporations.
Interesting. And so you talked about two or three things. One is around AI, one is around governance. I want to understand now when it comes to AI, a lot of technology right now is still in beta phase. If I look at the kind of control that we want to give to AI, is still we're still trying to figure
Right.
that bit.
Yeah.
How are you looking at companies on the build versus buy decision when it comes to specifically AI? And in general, are there any specific frameworks or how do you look at things? And I'm specifically looking at the enterprise side because I think smaller
Okay.
companies will
Right.
still figure it how, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, from the enterprise side, especially when you have a mass amount of clients, you have to look at those things, right? You have to look
Yeah.
at the governance. You have to look at the pros and the cons of it. Obviously, it can help streamline, let's say your employees' jobs in regards without casting fear of job security, but it can aid in the functionality of the job of being able to do a certain function of that job faster, streamline it. You can have different AI mechanics, robots, or even certain aspects of AI that can generate, let's say, certain emails and things for you on a mass scale that you need to for enterprise or corporation. But still going back to that, like you said, a lot of AI is still in the beta phase, but it's being rolled out, right? So you got to be
Yeah.
mindful in regards to governance. And if there's not certain controls, how does that change the dynamic? What does that mean for your corporation? What does that mean for your enterprise? Not only for the here and now, but let's say once and if governance is in place, and if governance is not something that is going to be in place here readily soon, how does that affect the corporation on a long-term stance? One thing I'll get just with AI, again, it's coming, it's here, and it's evolving at a
Mm.
rapid speed. With that, that's not even taken into context changing certain job structures on how we go about doing certain job structures. It's not even taken into context that quantum computing, this is a new emerging aspect, in regards to code and technology and things and AI, it's a very lucrative concept, but at the same time, everybody's still learning it, real time. When you take in quantum computing and you look at the old coding aspect, you use binary numbers for old coding just to be able to show a picture or a word or a standard number. But when you take in quantum computing, it's like I always say, imagine like a box or like a present, and you put all those binary numbers into that present, and it makes that present so. So when you take that in and you start integrating that into enterprises and corporations, it changes the whole outcome of the end goal, because now it turns into that we can do this. How fast can we be ahead of our competition? Now we can be ahead of the competition at lightning speed, but in regards to AI and optimization. It helps you to optimize it in a different way that's pretty much unheard of in this day and age and compared to how we operated before.
Interesting. When it comes to vendor management, what are the biggest mistakes which companies make when it comes to working with external vendors? Any pointers that you have around it?
Um, I wouldn't say so much the biggest mistake. I would say just being aware that you have to read the fine print. All vendors have a certain agenda, just like every corporation has a certain agenda. And at the end of the day, it's like they want to make sales, but they also want to save their bottom line. So when you get into working with vendors, it's understanding the terms and the conditionings of those terms, understanding what comes with that, and not just on a very high level, but get down into it to really say, okay, how can we leverage this vendor to where we both end in the positive? There a lot of times, especially with enterprise, you have certain benchmarks that you need to achieve, and ideally you don't just want to achieve them, you want to surpass those benchmarks, and with saving revenue and capitalizing on revenue. So the easiest way is with working with your vendors is making sure that they are aligned with your area of need, and that they can actually address that area need at the minimal cost possible, but to where you can still leverage that business relationship and that they comply with the terms and conditions of what's been established.
Mm. And what happens when, let's say, many a times when it comes to SaaS products or products which get embedded into the tech or the system, if those fail, are there any fail-safe mechanisms in place around that? So, like for example, there is a tool, a finance tool, or let's say an AWS kind of an add-on or something which you people are using. And initially it was working fine, but the moment you start scaling or adding more pressure onto it, it breaks. Are there usually any rollback mechanisms or fail-safe mechanisms which are in place? I'm not just talking about tech, but in general, when you are onboarding a vendor or when you're onboarding any kind of a service, when you're operating at scale, you can't afford to for the system to break
Right.
down, right? So
Right.
how do you ensure fail-safe mechanisms when you're onboarding anything or onboarding a new product or a service or something? And in general, what are the frameworks around it?
Well, just very high level, those are legitimate concerns and questions, right? Because especially when you're trying to scale and you have a new product and it comes in, and but you still want to make sure that your current clients and new clients can still operate and it not cause gaps within that flow. So just again, very high level, without too much technical terms, you want to make sure that you still maintain what you have while you're rolling out the new initiative. So that way, when those gaps or those glitches and things do occur, it's not wiping everything out. It's not putting your users, your end users in a situation of not being able to do basics of what they're accustomed to until you get all those things ironed out. Again, I don't want to get too much into the intricate aspects of it, but very high level, that's what you would want to do. There's also a term called shovelware where you can have certain components communicate back and forth with the programs in which you're using. So that way it can pull information, it can pull data, and it can actually give it to where you're not having to put yourself in a situation for error, for I'll say whether it's integration error, because that, but again, you want to vet all of the vendors, you want to vet all of the platforms and things that you're using to do this integration. So that way it does help prevent as you scale to ensure that this is the right product or the right program to use going forward on a very high level.
Usually, do you build this into the architecture, as in the root mechanisms that if this fails, then it should definitely point to this and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's twofold. I think it's going to really depend on where you're at as a corporation or as a small business. So,
Hmm.
for example, you can build it into the framework, and then that way you're not really relying on third party initiatives, right? To where it could
Hmm.
jeopardize your overall, company. But here's the other thing, when you get to a certain level, it's more lucrative to integrate, third parties and not so much build it into the
Hmm.
the application or build it into the system.
Hmm.
A lot of times it's more lucrative to leverage the third parties because they've already done it. The old term of, why recreate the wheel whenever somebody did it, and then you can just leverage and then just have them as a third party vendor. So there's benefits to both, but it goes back to understanding where you're at in your scalability, if that's the right thing for you to do or not. Because if you integrate something yourself and it's not contingent upon a third party, you have complete governance over it. You have complete understanding of how it's going to work. And if it's dealing with code, if it glitches or let's say something breaks, where to go in and to fix that. When you're dealing with third parties, if a third party is integrated into handling a certain initiative of yours, if their aspect breaks, it's inadvertently going to break something with what you have because it's integrated. So now you're contingent upon them fixing their aspects to leverage to make sure it does not jeopardize the functionality of your business or your clients. So that is something that you definitely have to be mindful of. But again, it goes back to where you're at within your scalability to determine which option is the best strategy for you.
Interesting. Last question around vendors, and I know that I'm going a little bit deeper, but I'm sure that very rarely do we find experts who are of this field. So, um, as a small business, if I am pitching to you to an
Mhm.
enterprise, how do I get to negotiate better with you? Because usually smaller businesses don't get much room for negotiations. Bigger ones still
Right.
can, but how does one negotiate and get better terms when it comes to dealing with enterprises?
That's a good question. It kind of goes back to the other statement in regards to showing the value, having a strong pitch, having a strong deck, a strong business plan. Because if you can show an enterprise a return on their investment from their engagement with you, of course, they're going to, make some changes. But that structure has to be very, very strong because at the end of the day, if the enterprise is going to change some of the terms or change some of the rates and things of that nature, they have to see that long term is going to be an added value back to them. I always say having an excellent 30-second elevator pitch with with a very strong deck is going to be something that's going to give you the most leverage. Also, proof of concept. And when I say proof of concept, especially if you're a small business and you're a new business, you may feel you don't have the proof of concept, but you do. There's something else out there that may be not exactly what you're creating, maybe not exactly your business, but something very similar. So you want to analyze your competitors or some of the similar businesses out there and then show the added value that your business sets apart from them and how it can speak to their bottom line and increase their margins in a positive way by at least about maybe 10 to 12%. At that point, and if you have the proof of concept there, the enterprise is going to be more open to helping to, integrate whether it's pricing terms, if it's funding initiatives, if it's capital that you need to help be able to segue into their market a little bit better. I
Hmm,
always say whenever you're talking to enterprise, you always have to speak to the bottom line.
interesting. Okay, Selena, I wanna move a little bit towards BizClips now. What stage? I mean, are you people still going gung ho? How's it going there?
Yeah, being very transparent. It's going pretty good. It's going as it's expected, considering we are also, a small business in tech. Mentioning very similar to before, because it was so innovative, it was so ahead of the curve. When we first came into market, it was trying to get individuals to understand the concept, but because the concept was so lucrative, it did well. Especially with being able to leverage a lot of major corporations, a lot of buy-in from corporations now that was small corporations back then, that they're thriving, they're doing well, and they bought into BizClips early on. So in that sense, even with anything with small business, hurdles come up, trials come up, setbacks happen. As much as you try to protect your concept and your idea, you can still have certain individuals or entities that try to infringe upon it because they realize, wow, this is a interesting concept, and maybe we could take a certain component and implement it in our corporation, or we can have a certain component and try to do something different and beat them to the market. But the thing with BizClips is, and I always tell people, protect your concept, protect your idea, starting off whether you need to obtain a patent, copyright, trademarks, even before you start sending it out to get leverage. Capitalization is something that's always key. And, sometimes because going back to, like you said, how do you attract, certain enterprises and things of that nature, because it's so new, especially back when we first came into the market, it was trying to get individuals to understand the lucrativity of it
Mm,
and how it can scale, especially in regards to it being immersed in with a $600 billion enterprise, in regards to you open yourself up being able to tap into various markets with just marketing initiatives and things of that nature. I mean, when you take in regards to the average online annual revenue, it's in the billions, So from marketing and sales and things, just being able to do so at your fingertips. I think once a lot of the corporations we were speaking and speaking to realize that, that's how we got a lot of buy-in. That's also how we were able to land, various contracts and things of that nature with some major TV networks, as well as, this press releases and media initiatives and things that reached out to BizClips early on. But again, as I mentioned, one of the hurdles and challenges that we ran into is because that was so lucrative, a lot of other entities grasped into that and then, tried to capitalize on that for themselves. Right.
yeah,
So, but we're doing well. We're doing well. We have some new innovative aspects that we are working on and that's currently implemented in BizClips that we will be rolling out here soon when we reemerge back to the
correct.
market. And we have a lot of partners, a lot of major corporations, a lot of networks and things that's involved on the back end that is excited about what we're going to be reemerging with.
It's a platform which helps people monetize content, right?
Yes.
It's a one-line pitch, yeah.
Yeah, so and here's the thing, it connects businesses, professionals, consumers, and influencers. It utilizes consumer reviews because we always say that we're walking billboards, right? And you never really
Of
realize
course.
how you're influencing somebody just based off of maybe a shirt you have on or the way that you style a certain concept or something. And when you speak on it, people are influenced by their peers. So BizClips connects that component. It's been connecting that component since we were in market in 2015, and it would leverage that to help bring exposure to small businesses and major corporations. One concept that I always get, it may be a small mom and pop coffee shop around the corner, but if you go left every morning instead of turning right, you may not even realize that that coffee shop is there. But you can
Yeah.
leverage, a consumer review of a person that brings awareness. And now, you have more clients that are navigating their mix with that person that did the consumer review is able to obtain revenue from their small contribution of helping. That's one component of BizClips. BizClips is it's very diverse in a sense that it has another component that deals with what we were just explaining in regards to pitch, having a 30-second elevator pitch to be able to attract
Mhm.
investors, mixed with having creating 30-second elevator pitch as well. Right now, we're living in the era of NIL deals, as well as just being able to obtain employment. It streamlines the hiring and the marketing process for businesses because now you can put a visual component to it. Plus, you can do what we call a visual resume mixed with a visual job announcement. So BizClips connects that
Interesting.
to where it allows them to integrate that and to basically submit immediately. And then here's the other thing that it does so hell. It reduces turnover. because now you get people that can visually see what the job entails. They can visually see, okay, is this a place I really could envision myself working at? Not just a commercial, but I'm able to visually see the job functionalities of what the employer is asking the hire to do. And then from there, you have the ability to give a visual response to that, showing your job skills, showing what you've done in the past, whether you do it in a trailer format or a real format, mixed with a virtual resume to submit your application. And if what we've noticed with our beta option, it has reduced turnover significantly, just based off of giving that visual presence to that aspect.
Interesting. Help me understand this, Selena. You have been working with enterprises also. How has that experience influenced the way you function in BizClips?
I would say structure, really. Because as creators, and I'll just even say as entrepreneurs, as individuals that have a creative mindset, you have your idea, in your head. You may even have it on paper, but sometimes you have all these ideas. You have to simplify it for the average person to be able to understand, grasp the concept, to see the end goal that you're trying to get at. So I would say with working in enterprise, it's helped place that aspect into structure, in regards to don't jump so far ahead, to where you get it, but everybody else may not be on the same page because it's something that you internalize, that you internally know and know where you're trying to get to. So with working in enterprise, I always like to say it helps be able to structure and segment certain things like phase one, phase two, phase three, or in regards to if you go from a tech component, it would be the beta version to your MVP to your enterprise version. Is putting those things and putting the structure around it so that way it also helps you to be able to scale and help roll out certain aspects at the right time, that the society is ready for.
Interesting. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think once you work in a bigger setup, you get more clarity in terms of how you want to
Mhm.
structure the whole thing.
Right.
It becomes much more clearer in your head and how you want to break it phase by.
Exactly. Exactly.
Do you believe the future of social media platforms is monetization first versus engagement first?
No, actually, I think engagement is first, then monetization. I mean, for example, you have to be able to engage. You have to be in tune with what is going on around you and harness that engagement before you can implement the monetization. But at the same time, here's the thing, with social media, again, it's evolved so much. And just in regards, and I'll use BizClips as an example, we call it the Uber of marketing because it allows you to be able to quickly earn at your fingertips. But it's based off of engagement, whether it's
Mm,
visual engagement, because we also understand too the way social media has been trending. You can have, let's say, 1,000 views and maybe 20 people liked it, right? But
yeah,
some would say engagement is the like, while others consider the engagement, well, they viewed it. And
views.
I'm one of those
Yeah.
individuals. I believe more in quantity over quality. So
Mm,
I'm sorry, I'm one of those individuals where I believe in quality over quantity. So the quality in regards to views, you may have 1,000 views, but in regards to quantity, you may only have 20 likes. But does that diminish the product? No, it doesn't. Does that diminish the outreach? No. It's still engagement. It's just captured on and rated on a different premise, I'll say, a different canvas.
the
Some people
different
rate
metric, yeah.
certain things based off of, okay, I can see 20 people liked, while others say, well, the canvas of this is, do you have 1,000 people that viewed? So that lets me know in regards to an engagement standpoint, we reached 1,000 people. Now, whether that 1,000 took action or not, then that's something as far as data analytics you need to, evaluate and see, but it's still reached. So the quality is more important, than the quantity, similar to engagement especially out the gate, will initiate the monetization of it. So that's kind of how I view it if I had to put it in perspective. And with that, that will harness certain leverage. So going back to BizClips being the Uber of marketing, whenever we first came up with this concept, again, I was a college student back then, and I realized the power of video. And I said, wow, we have this organization, we're putting on these events and these shows. And based off of this video, we've had X amount of views, but we have a turnout. Now, this goes back
Yeah.
to the quantity. We had a turnout of over 1,000 people that showed up for the 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 event that we were doing based off of a video that we produced. So we're taking that and saying, okay, how can we harness this? Not just for us, but for everybody. Like, that prime example, you have the ability to leverage and help as well as monetize from people that are across the globe, in various different places. So with doing that, BizClips curated that concept of putting the ability to earn, make revenue at your fingertips, lightning speed, regardless of the amount of followers you have, because again, it's not so much based off of the quantity, it's the quality of your output that's going to drive engagement that helps you reach your monetization.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Which platform are you more active on, Selena? LinkedIn, Insta?
LinkedIn. So, and I'll say this, I have, going back again to quantity and quality, right? So, and this is something that I think a lot of people will be able to relate. A lot of times when you are growing, scaling, not just your business, but yourself as well, you get a lot of eyes on you, right? When we first started BizClips, we had a lot of eyes on us very early on. We were advertised and had certain TV network segments and things nationally and internationally, which gave a lot of visibility um, to BizClips as well as to myself. And so my LinkedIn generated a lot of followers based off of that, which I'm very thankful for, and I greatly appreciate all of them. And also too, I just want to say I got a lot of happy birthday messages from LinkedIn, and I have not been able to get through all of them to respond, but do know I am going in and responding to each and every one of you. So thank you. But the reason I say that, I think LinkedIn, because it also shows that dynamic of the business aspect, although it doesn't give a full perspective of it. I work with a lot of corporations and CEOs um, globally, really, nationally and internationally. So LinkedIn, in regards to that polished professional image, is where I get most of my engagement from. I had a decent following on Instagram, but my Instagram got hacked. Prime, when we were, at the top of our prime with BizClips back when we first came out. But that goes into, like I said, too, as well, for whatever reasons that happened back then, it happened. But you don't let those types of things stop or
Of
stall you.
course. Of
Yeah.
course. Help me understand. So I think LinkedIn has also changed over the years. I think that's one of the best channels for
Yeah.
businesses to be active in, rather
Right.
business professionals to be active on. What's working now on LinkedIn? Especially because I think every 3 months the algo changes. But LinkedIn is still one of those archaic
Hmm.
platforms which still follows the older rules of
Yeah.
social media. But help me
Right.
understand from your experience and your learning, what works on LinkedIn?
I think for me is the fact that you can connect with the owner or CEO of a major corporation. So that is a lot of leverage in regards to other social platforms. Now, don't get me wrong, you can always follow somebody, but LinkedIn has a mechanism where not only can you follow, you can connect. Now, granted, some may say, well, you can do the same with Instagram. You can connect with the major, CEO or celebrity, and you can, send them a DM. Yeah, you can, but it doesn't give the same authentic structure as LinkedIn does, in the sense of truly saying, I'm coming to you as a professional. I want to connect with you as a professional, whether it's to be a benefit to you, your business, your corporation, or to where I can learn from you. So I think LinkedIn has been able to capitalize on the need and the niche for that, to where that's why I think LinkedIn works in regards to the professional side of the house, with connecting with different businesses, different employers, from an individual to the business, or from the individual to the CEO, because they can see your professional attributes, and it allows you to display it in a way that sets you out as a professional, saying, please, let's take what we are connecting on serious. Otherwise, that connection won't happen. And so I think that's why LinkedIn has been able to be so lucrative, and successful in their platform.
Interesting. Cool. One last question, Selena. You've managed teams, systems, you have your own startup, you work with enterprises. What makes someone a high leverage operator? What makes someone a successful professional? What are any few traits that you've seen common across people?
I love this question. It's about being open to learning, and never have the mindset that just because you achieved a certain goal, whether it's an educational goal, let's say it's a degree, or let's say you made your business successful, it's having the mindset that you never stop learning. Most of the most successful businesses and CEOs and executive producers that I've worked with, they are always open to learn. They have the mindset that they are, don't get me wrong, but they also know that they can learn from others. And they don't tend to diminish others or try to impose that they are the expert per se, even though they may be. But they are always open, to learning, and not just open. They want to learn from others. They want to sit down with somebody that they think, or that they see is on the cutting edge of something, and they embrace that, and they take it in, and more so turn into the student themselves, and allow the other to be the teacher, so they can learn from them. So I love that, because most of the most successful people that I know, they all operate that same way. And here's the other thing to it too. With us living in an era where, again, it's about how many followers, how many connections you have, right? Another common trait that I noticed with some of the most successful ones, they kind of work more so behind the scenes. It's
Mm.
like, if you know who they are, then right? But if not, the average everyday person may not be aware that they are actually the CEO. And this goes to not bringing fashion in it, but it goes to that term of, some of the most successful people don't want you to really know that they
Yeah.
are, so they have more plain clothes, no labels, and they're the top earner, in the one percentile, so that also is something I noticed across their social platforms, as well. Some of them don't have the largest followings, and yet they're making major impacts in the industry. But homing it back into your main question, I would say the number one common denominator across the board is that they all are willing and open to learn, and they want to learn, regardless of how much that they have succeeded,
Yeah.
regardless of how much they have achieved, they're still learning, and putting themselves out to say, okay, what could I learn next?
And that's a very, very, very on point answer, Selena. I absolutely agree with you. I think the best people are those who are open to learning, who have a learning mindset. You know,
Right.
they never believe themselves to be experts, even though they are. But
Yeah.
usually they're always open. There might be things that they might not know, and they would always,
Right.
they're good listeners, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to ask. They don't take it as, if they ask or if they reach out, it diminishes who they are. They actually empower that. And sometimes, a lot of times, they're the ones asking most of the questions. And I'll
Yeah.
say that too, even in some of my interactions with different people, especially if it's a seminar or a large crowd or presentation, and you're presenting, and then you open it up for questions. I always home in on the ones that ask the most questions, because they're trying to learn. They're asking for a reason. And I always have this mindset of, if you can make a difference in one person, you have the ability to affect millions. Reason
Yeah.
being, some beneficial information you gave that one person, some encouragement you gave that one person, who knows, they can go be the next leader of your country,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then have the potential to affect a massive amount of people. So always home in on to that one person that's asking questions because they want to learn, they're trying to learn, so that way they can go make a impact in society.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Serena, for your time. Hopefully, you had a good
Thank you.
experience as well.
I did.
Looking forward to staying connected.
Absolutely.